welcome to this episode of Inside View. My name's Cory Burnell, and I'll be your host. And we have an exciting privilege today. We have a guest on our show called Joel Metzger, and Joel is the general manager of Utica Water and Power Authority here in Calaveras County. And Joel used to actually be a host of this show from time to time. Remember those days, Joel?
I remember them well. I'll never forget. I enjoyed it very much.
Well, it's a pleasure to hang out with you and do this episode and to see you in your new role over at UWPA. So, tell us a little bit about, let's see, you've been there about 3 months. You tell us a little bit about your history in the community. You were at CCWD, and people who are locals here probably know you. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Yes, I think a lot of people in the community know me.
Yeah.
I was born and raised in this area, grew up in San Andreas, and my grandfather, Grant, used to run the Calaveras cement plant back in the 60s. And then my dad, Randy Metzger, was the Calaveras County assessor for many years, and very involved in local politics and running the government. And then I went to college and came back and started working for the Calaveras Enterprise newspaper. Mm-hmm. And I worked there for what I thought was going to be a 6-month kind of just test your feet, see how it goes. And I ended up loving journalism. So I worked my way up from the cub reporter, who took all the stories no one else wanted to cover, all the way up to being the editor of the Calaveras Enterprise newspaper over about 6 years.
Wow.
And I always say that I really didn't want to live in Calaveras County when I was young and first out of college. I kind of wanted to just visit and then leave and go out into the big world. But it was that newspaper job that sent me all over the county into communities that I never otherwise would have visited. And I met the people who have made this their home and were investing in the community, the movers and the shakers. Mm-hmm. And I really fell in love with Calaveras County as a newspaper man and eventually an editor. So I really am grateful for that experience. And then I was offered the job and the opportunity to work for CCWD, Calaveras County Water District. And that was going over there and doing their PR for them and the customer service management. And I spent 6 years there, and I worked my way up into grants management and some legislative advocacy and continuing to manage customer service and then doing all of their external affairs, all their public-facing communications. And really enjoyed that incredible opportunity, great people, great board members, and about 22,000 people throughout the county are served by CCWD. So continued to meet more people and get more connected. Yeah. And then just recently, 3.5 months ago, in July of this year, I was fortunate enough to be hired by the Utica Water and Power Authority as their new general manager. And I'll tell you what, Cory, the first 3 months have been fast and furious. I feel like I haven't even taken a breath. But I'm so fortunate to be there. I'm so excited about the future, and I really feel grateful to have the opportunity.
Been drinking from a fire hose the last 3 months.
No doubt about it.
Yeah. Well, it's your story's so fun, Joel, because here you get your college degree, you come back here not knowing exactly what you want to do in the community, but you get embedded in the community. And then find various career paths here. I mean, did you ever see yourself in water management and power management?
Not in the beginning.
Originally? Right?
Not at all. Yeah. The one thing when I think back on it, though, is I always was fascinated by water. Whenever I would see a stream or a river or a pipeline or a canal, I would always think as a kid, where's that coming from? And where is it going? And how is it getting there? And so I used to geek out over it. I'd look at maps and diagrams and just try to figure it out. And I have always loved hiking, and I would go down and just hike rivers just to follow them and see where they'd go and see areas that people couldn't get to easily.
Right.
So I always had that fascination. But no, I never really thought, well, I want to get into the industry and I want to teach people about water and educate them about how expensive it is to actually provide it and provide it in a clean and safe manner. And boy, I'll tell you, CCWD has some really neat systems, but the Utica system, dating back to 1852, back to the gold rush, that is just a one-of-a-kind system, and the history of it is just unreal. So I've really enjoyed getting to know such a unique system.
Well, we're going to delve into that. This is pretty cool. So, before we get into the history of the system, let's tell our viewers a little bit about who UWPA serves, right? I mean, there's Murphy's, Vallecito, Angels Camp. If they're getting water in those cities, and Douglas Flat, I think, so then it's coming from UWPA.
Yeah, so that's a key thing. UWPA has always kind of been in the background, and the staff just does what they do and make it happen, but no one really knows what it takes. But so UWPA provides what I call the raw water, or the river water, not treated, anything like that. It's just what comes right out of the river. The water comes from the North Fork of the Stanislaus River, and it actually comes down to a reservoir called McKay's Reservoir, and that's an on-stream reservoir. And then it goes through a 9-mile tunnel underground, drilled through solid rock.
Really?
And just to picture how big this tunnel is, it's 18 feet in diameter.
No way.
So you could drive a semi-truck through this tunnel. That's how big this thing is.
How old's that tunnel?
It was built in the early 90s.
Wow. Okay.
And it was built through a partnership of CCWD and Northern California Power Agency, another agency that very few people know exists up in the Calaveras.
So we got a river flowing through a 9-mile tunnel through rock.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. All those upcountry reservoirs, like people will know Spicer, Alpine, Utica, Union, all that watershed of the North Fork Stanislaus, it all drains down. It's captured in the high country reservoirs. They make a little power up there, they release it, and then it comes down, and all those rivers come together in the confluence and become the North Fork. And they come down, and McKay's is a small reservoir, but it is an on-stream one, and it's basically just a diversion reservoir. So it catches that big flow of the North Fork Stanislaus. It releases a fish flow, because you always have to release enough for fish to live, but the majority of that river gets diverted into that 18-foot diameter tunnel. And it runs 9 miles through solid rock, and then it drops down, and it runs the biggest power generation facility in the county, which is called the Collierville Power Plant. And that's out at the end of Camp 9 Road, which you'd access from Vallecito, right where New Maloney's Reservoir begins, the very upstream portion of that. Now, where does UWPA fit into this? We actually have what's called the tunnel tap. And so this is a shaft that's drilled in the middle of the tunnel. It's not the full 9 miles. It's only maybe 4.5 miles down from McKay's. We drill straight down, and there's so much head pressure, because that tunnel is falling, and so head pressure, PSI, is growing. And so we just use gravity, and it pushes the water straight up from that underground tunnel up into a pipeline, and basically we diffuse the energy in a facility where the tunnel tap is, and then that water runs into a 1800s era canal and flume system. And we maintain this flume system, which is an open ditch, just picture an open earthen ditch, and then a flume. Think of like a train trestle, a wooden train trestle, but instead of a train track on top of it, it's a box, and it's lined with metal, and it runs water. And so you use flumes to cross things like canyons or steep hillsides.
Now, do we see some of this flume along Murphy's Grade Road?
You do.
Okay.
It looks like it's running uphill.
Yeah, it sure does. It's an optical illusion. It's crazy. So where else would we see this flume in the county?
So the most breathtaking example of the flume is called the 3/4 mile flume.
Okay.
And this is a flume that dates all the way back, to the 1800s, and it's built on one of the steepest sections of the Stanislaus River Canyon, kind of near the Hathaway Pines area. So Highway 4 goes through. You have to go out to the canyon wall to see it. You'd need to get a drone or a helicopter to really see it out there. It's rugged, it's steep. It's on Forest Service land and BLM out there. And just think of a hillside that is just so steep you almost couldn't stand up on it. And these miners back in the day were able to pin this flume onto this steep hillside because it was so rocky and so steep they couldn't dig the canal, which is the cheapest and easiest way to go. Okay. And so they had to cross this section. So it's called 3/4 mile flume because it's 3/4 mile long. So that's a long wooden box flume. And man, if you go to our website, which I do encourage people to do, uticapower.com, you can see drone footage and pictures of this beautiful section of historic flume.
Yeah, let's make sure that people do get the opportunity to have that information early on here in the show. That's uticapower.com is your website. Then they also can follow UWPA on Facebook with facebook.com/Utica Water.
Yes.
Okay, so Utica Water is the Facebook page and uticapower.com is the website.
Yes, and we're really excited. We're just about to launch a brand new website, and so hopefully by the time people are able to see this, we're going to come out with that. I just got the date this afternoon. It looks like November 17th is when that new website's going to launch, and it's going to be a total redesign, a lot more photographs and videos and compelling historical information, educational information, much more user-friendly experience. So we're really excited about that.
Well, yeah, let's encourage everybody to go check that out, or at least continue to visit the website to be a part of the new launch there.
No, for sure.
Now, one thing that's interesting to me about the history of the flume here, a wooden box flume, since 1852, is that when it originally was built?
That's when the Union Water Company was formed. So we're Utica.
Okay.
That was the Utica Gold Mining Company. But the first organization that decided to organize and put money into getting water down to the mines was the Union Water Company. And so in 1849, all the miners showed up, but they were still mining by 1852. And what they realized was there were some rich gold deposits in this whole area, but especially along the Murphys, Vallecito area, and Angels Camp. Those were all just very rich deposits. But in order to mine, you need water. And we mainly have seasonal creeks in Calaveras County. We don't have, in the central part of the county, we don't have year-round creeks. And so when Angels Creek, which is the one that runs through Murphy's and then eventually through Angels Camp, and when Coyote Creek, which runs through Vallecito, when those went dry, the miners kind of were out of luck. They couldn't really run a lot of product through. So the nearest year-round source of water is the North Fork Stanislaus. But it was deep down in the canyon, and getting Stanislaus River water up out of that canyon using only gravity, because they didn't have pumps back then, that was their challenge. And so what they had to do is they had to figure out, okay, what's the elevation of Murphy's, and then how high up the river canyon do we need to go to start that flume? And it turns out it was almost to Big Tree State Park, where you would drive all the way down to the river canyon. Just below there, where the current McKay's Reservoir is, that's where they started that flume. And that flume went much, much farther because they didn't have the tunnel back then, so they had to have the flume all the way along that river canyon. And then they just use incredible engineering without the modern tools to get the level right, because it can't ever go uphill and it can't go too far downhill. It's got to be just a slight drop to use gravity to run that water along the ditches and the flumes. And they figured it out and they nailed it, and we still use the same slope that they did back then.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, one thing that has happened over time is, of course, these boxes are built out of wood, and wood burns, and we have fires up here. So tell us a little bit about how the flume's been damaged by fire and how that's impacted the community over the years.
And this is something that I lose sleep over at night, honestly, is having so many flumes out there. We don't just have one wooden flume, we have many, many, many wooden flumes to cross little canyons and gullies and things of that nature. And in 2001, the Darby fire roared up out of the Stanislaus River Canyon. They believe it started down near Camp 9, down near that power plant. Still unknown who started it or whether it was natural or man-made. And it roared up the canyon, and it went so fast that it burned that entire section of 3/4 mile flume, completely destroyed it. And the whole thing's wooden, and it was gone. And so that effectively cut off the water supply to about 10,000 people in Calaveras County. And I should mention, once the water goes into the UWPA system up there in the Avery area after that tunnel tap, it goes 27 miles all the way to Angels Camp. And it goes through 5 reservoirs and flumes and ditches, and it also goes through 2 hydroelectric power plants, which are also really cool and very old, really neat technology using Pelton wheels and things like that.
Wow.
And so, so we make power and water, and Angels Camp completely relies on the water that we provide to then go to their treatment plant, and they chlorinate it and treat it and then provide it to their customers. And same thing with Murphy's with Union Public Utility District, or UPUD. They take water from us, they treat it, and then they provide it to their customers. And then we have a bunch of people who are ag customers. And so when you see irrigated pasture between Angels Camp and Murphy's, that's probably coming off of our system or through one of our member agencies. So back to the Darby fire, when that flume burned, well, that's the sole water supply for all these farmers and ranchers and for all the residents in those cities. And so they were completely cut off, and it was a huge emergency. And so what we had to do was we had to dam up the canal upstream of the burned area, put 4 or 5 pipes into this little pond that was made, and then put temporary gas-powered pumps or diesel-powered pumps that would pump up over the hill around that steep section that burned and then come down into the section that was still okay. But we were running like 45 CFS, cubic feet per second, normally, and those pumps could only do 5 CFS.
Oh, goodness.
So we're talking bare minimum. And it was, I believe it was close to a year before they actually were able to rebuild the whole flume. And one of my critiques, and I know I'm someone coming in now, and hindsight is 2020, but they rebuilt that flume using wood. And that just is something that I understand. It was the grants they got. Insurance wants to replace in kind and all that, but. Not only did they rebuild with wood, but they didn't even use pressure-treated wood for the most part. And so it's going to fail much more quickly. And so now, 20 years later, we are rebuilding that fully replaced flume. And in the years leading up to this year, we've already been rebuilding huge sections. So it hasn't even lasted 20 years. And so that's a huge risk. It's a huge hazard, and one of my goals as the general manager is to work with our partners and work with Cal OES and FEMA and other granting agencies and see if we can't try to be proactive about that problem instead of waiting for it to burn again. And I really believe that's a when, not an if, that it's going to burn again. I would really like to see us to harden that flume against wildfire, and that could be something like replacing it with a metal flume, concrete and metal. We could also bench the hillside. We could just really cut into that with modern tools and then make a concrete canal instead of a wooden flume. Or the most expensive option would be we could drill a tunnel that's inside of the hillside and just get away from being on this completely exposed area with some kind of a conveyance system.
Which of the three, no, we're talking about the three-quarter mile
Three-quarter
section.
mile, yeah.
Which of the three is the least expensive, just replacing the flume with materials that don't burn, or would it be benching the hillside and doing a canal there?
So the least expensive for fire prevention is always just trying to do clearing and defensible space and leaving everything. That's always the least expensive. So that's kind of like but the problem is when you have hillsides that steep, even if you had like 100 feet of clearance, which would be very hard to do on that kind of terrain, those fires are so hot, you'd still lose it. And so I'm not in favor of that. I think we need to try to invest more. And so, the metal flume is probably the least expensive. Bringing big equipment and blasting and making that bench and then doing the concrete canal is probably number 2. Tunnel, I would think, would be the most expensive option. And there may be other options that I'm not currently aware of. When the engineers look at it, we can hopefully get some.
Are there other sections of flume that also are in jeopardy? And then are you prioritizing which sections you may or may not want to replace more quickly than others?
Absolutely. Every single wooden flume, in my mind, is at risk, especially on those steep canyons. So I can share that I am pursuing grant funding, and I have been invited to submit a full grant application, and our board just authorized last night to go forward with that. That's a $10 million grant that we're seeking, and that would include...
From where, Joel? Which
from
agency?
California OES,
okay.
And then they do initial approval, and then it goes to FEMA, and FEMA would be the final approval. Now, this is not a grant that we've gotten yet. We're just in the application process. A lot of planning and design would need to happen, but my goal would be, let's try to get enough money to replace all of those wooden flumes with something that would resist a wildfire and keep that sole water supply reliable and safe for these 10,000 plus people who we serve.
Do you think that in your experience with pursuing grants, either we get the grant and it's all or nothing, or is this something where we can occasionally get a grant and piecemeal it?
Absolutely.
Oh, we can?
All of the above.
Okay.
We're kind of shooting for the moon with that $10 million. But we're going to start chipping away at this, getting planning and design done. And if we don't get this grant, we'll go after another one, and we'll try to get it together. And I would say something else. A lot of barriers will have to be overcome in order to make this go forward. But what I don't want to lose is the historical value of these flumes, because they're a really important piece of our history. And so I have really worked hard to try to partner with the Historical Society, and we'd like to rebuild a whole section of true dimensional flume at the museum in San Andreas, and also the museum in Angels Camp, where all this mining was really going on. And then on our new website, we're going to dedicate an entire page to our history and to flumes and how this was all done all the way back to the mining days. And whenever I do public speaking engagements, I'm going to let people know about that and show pictures. And I don't want that memory to leave us. And I think the flumes will be with us for many years to come, but I just can't tolerate that level of risk for the community.
Sure.
With the wildfires that we're seeing.
Well, and it's not speculation, it's happened.
Yeah.
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 Well, let's talk about something that you brought up earlier about the fact that UWPA is also a power generator, and hydro, which quite frankly is the cleanest energy on the planet. The production of hydro plants takes a lot less. It's a lot cleaner than the production of, say, batteries or solar panels or windmills. So there are two power generations along your lines. Tell our viewers a little bit about that.
Yes, so the larger of the two plants is in Murphy's, and when you're leaving Murphy's and heading up the hill, there's a grade, and if you look to your right when you start to go up the hill, you'll see a little, it's called an afterbay, it's a little reservoir, and you'll see a power plant kind of up on the east end of that. So that's our larger 3.4 or 3.6 megawatt power plant. And then down in Angels Camp, we have a 1.4 megawatt power plant. And that one is on Booster Way, kind of across from Tryon Park, where the pool used to be in Angels Camp down there. And a lot of people, what they see is the penstock, and a penstock is a pipe that goes from usually a reservoir down a big hill, and then that pipe feeds pressurized water into a wheel, in our case a Pelton wheel. And so those who drive out of Angels Camp on Murphy's Grade Road will see a big silver-colored round pipe that's 3 feet in diameter, running across green pastures on the Rolleri property. That's our penstock. That's what's powering our Angels powerhouse. And so these powerhouses were built in 1895 and then 1899 initially, and then they've been upgraded since then. The Utica and Union power companies and mining companies owned them up until 1946. And then the system was sold to PG&E in 1946. PG&E owned and operated it and did many upgrades to the system all the way until 1995, when CCWD bought the system and then formed a JPA, Joint Powers Authority, which includes UWPA as the operator, City of Angels as one of the recipients of the water, and then Union Public Utility District as another recipient of the water. And CCWD was initially in that JPA as well. They pulled out some years later and are no longer part of it.
Okay.
And so that's really how we were formed, and that's a little bit of the history. On the power plants, the reason why they were so attractive for that JPA to keep running is that when you have good power markets, the revenue that you can generate actually pays for the entire operation of the system, at least it used to. And so for 1995, 96, all the way until, I'm going to say 2010 to 2015, somewhere in there, there really weren't any contributions from the JPA members to UWPA. The power plants were really paying all the bills and paying back some debt. So they were really good markets. But what's happened, Cory, which is really disheartening, is that solar has been so subsidized and built in such huge numbers, huge amounts across California, that during the day when solar is really putting out a lot of energy, it's too much, especially in our market, which is small renewable, a lot of small renewable solar projects. And so people can buy cheap energy, green energy, for pennies. And we need to make good money in order, we used to make 30, 40, 50 bucks a megawatt hour. Now we're averaging $23 to $26 a megawatt hour. And that just isn't able to keep the doors open. So it's a big problem, and solar is the main reason why we're facing these bad markets.
That raises some questions because I would have thought that, okay, you generate the power and you just sell it into the grid with PG&E's grid, but that's not the case.
That is what we do.
That is what you do. It's just you're not getting paid very much because are you telling me that there's an overabundance of electricity out there?
There is.
And yet we had rolling blackouts this summer.
Right, and so part of the reason for that is we had a huge heat wave, so everyone was using extra AC. And then we had smoke coverage, and so solar wasn't able to put out what it normally did.
And according to the Commissioner of Energy, the wind stopped blowing too. He actually was quoted as saying that.
Well, that's the thing about wind is, you might have it, you might not. And that's why I think hydro is just such a great energy source because we have storage and we can release that and we can turn it on, pretty quickly.
Oh, right.
So, we have a little bit of a delay from our main reservoir down to our first plant, but, many hydros are snap your fingers and you're running. So what I do want to share is we've been facing budget deficits because of this. The power plants used to be, everything. And now our member agencies have been having to kick in more money just for us to be able to make our budget goals and be able to pay our employees. And so what I'm doing is working on some special programs. It's called REMAT. And it is a special program that was designed by the legislature to encourage new development of small green energy projects, 3 megawatts or under. And we were able to get the Angels Camp plant into this program in 2017. And so instead of being subjected to the open market, which is continuing to just take a nosedive for our category, we locked in a price of $89 a megawatt hour, which is, 23 to 89, it's huge.
For how long?
20 years.
20 years.
20 years. So that is just huge for us. That really helped. That was a shot in the arm, but it didn't solve all of our problems. Now we need to get Murphy's in there. And the program had some bumps in the road. It was had a legal challenge. It got suspended, but it just reopened within the last few weeks, and we're going to try to get Murphy's in there.
You said the Murphy's power plant's over that 3
It
megawatts.
It is. That's a very good point. It's 3.6.
It's 3.6.
And so we had to get special legislation passed, done before my time, to get an exemption that allows us to be part of the program and just generate up to that 3, not generate
you
over
kind of
it.
cap right.
Yep. So we're working on that. We're trying to get new revenue, but there's a lot of work ahead, and we still are facing financial challenges moving ahead for sure.
Well, we just have a couple minutes left here, Joel, but I think that in the 28 minutes we've been together here, I think our viewers can come to the conclusion you're the right guy for getting these things done. If you were going to say just over the next 1 or 2 minutes here, what's right on the horizon that you're going to be tackling in the next few months? You've only 3 months in the saddle, so what are you going to be shooting to accomplish for maybe in 2021, for example?
We're going to try to get that REMAT contract for our big plant and get a lot more money coming in. We're going to study our infrastructure and strategically start to replacing this old stuff that's been ignored for too many years. We're going to take care of our staff and make sure that we're being competitive and we can give them good benefits and good pay to keep good people here. And we're going to modernize our entire authority. And we're going to start taking advantage of technology and communications. And we're going to be a leaner, meaner machine. And then finally, we're going to educate the public about the importance of this agency, what we do, why we're important. And we're going to get them to be excited about this really cool historical system that we're keeping going and believe in keeping it going in the future. Because the last thing I would say is, without us operating and running, we have a huge amount of water rights at risk. And we want to protect those water rights for our future. And so we need to invest in our system and make sure that we can keep running and keep protecting those water rights and providing water to all of the residents in our area.
That is a fantastic point that all of our viewers should know. So, well, we are out of time, but before we go, let's give our viewers the website again. Is uticapower.com, and then the Facebook site is facebook.com/Utica Water.
Yeah, I don't know if
there
we
go.
Get that, but
if
yeah,
we can get that in.
That is where we'd love you to go to learn more about us, and we hope that you'll really enjoy the experience and learning more about UWPA.
Awesome. Joel, thank you for joining us. And to our viewers, thank you for watching. We hope you found this information very valuable. We'll see you next time on Inside View.